the questions. And I know, I don't think some of you have started solids, some of you are about to, and some are a little while away. So I'd love to keep this starting solids conversation ongoing in the live Q&As and also in the membership forum when it works again, when you can actually post something, which hopefully will be very soon. I would love for that to be, just because I know as a practitioner that it's something I get questions about all the time in my emails and whatever else, and lots of consultations with parents about starting solids. And it is a really important thing to kind of get right. Not that there's one right way, but it's important for me that you feel supported on that journey. So as long as this membership is sort of lasting, feel free to always reach out about it, although we'll get on to other topics very soon. But I think let it be one of those top of mind things, like do share how it's going, because it's important to get it right. And I will talk a little bit more about it now. So of course the starting solids that you've listened to is the foundations. It's sort of the basics of the basics in terms of how to start. And I guess my intention with that is that you understand it more from a bigger perspective, as opposed to just feed your baby food because breast milk or formula is not enough anymore, which was kind of the old dynamic, and I dislike it. And it's totally been debunked, and it's not the case. But I think it's important to come from it from both emotionally and understanding that it's such an experience for your baby when they start solids, and really supporting them in that, and allow. So one of you were writing about the mess. I really think it's important it gets messy, and that they smother themselves in the solids. And it's important they have such a beautiful relationship with food. Food, as I keep saying, probably, I think, is so emotional. And if you just, look at adults, we are so generally, struggling with food. We're either over-consuming, under-consuming, or relying on food-like substances that aren't food. No one really knows how much to eat and what to eat. And I think it's our chance as parents to start, our children on a really healthy foundation with a beautiful relationship with food, which should be really interactive and sensory and intuitive. So I hope that it has given you enough insight to, of course, practically know what to do and what to offer. And if you have questions, just shoot them down. You have given me some questions. I don't have as many questions as the other times, so there is room for extra. So feel free to shoot them in. But practically, obviously want you to know what to start with and why and how, but also I want you to just not stress. That's the number one thing that parents contact me about, is the stress, that they feel like their baby's eating too much or too little. That's literally number one. And then the parents are always like, I don't know how much to give my baby. And really, it's not so much about that. I hope you know that already if you've listened to the Starting Solids foundations, so that you know that it's about just following your baby's cues and not rushing it and not stressing it and not feeling like your baby's having too much or too little, because at this age, they're so good at just listening to their body. And it's so, so, so rare that they do anything that isn't right for them. They're so smart. It's not until we get older that we get really complex and complicated. So you have this golden opportunity, this golden window to offer them that beautiful start. So I hope it has given you that. Let me know if it has. And I might jump on to some questions, which will then probably spark some more talking. Okie dokie. I will talk on allergens today. I promised one of our beautiful mamas that, because I think it's important and it's so complex. So I guess I'm just giving you my little insight on it. There's a lot to it. So this specific mum who I've talked about allergens and starting solids with, we will have to continue to talk. But I think allergies in all the shapes and forms that they come is like it's huge and it's rampant. Allergies have gone up dramatically. I can't remember the percentage over the last few years, but it's going up a lot, and there's multiple components to it. So I will try and touch on it now as well. But I just wanted to answer some questions. So I have a question about giving vitamin D. And I know that in a lot of places, and especially in America, they sort of say to just routinely give vitamin D. And I guess my point of it is that vitamin D supplementation is synthetic. And when, I give vitamin D to adults all the time, but because a lot of us are deficient, and it's a really, really important nutrient, and it is actually very much indicated for allergies or prevention of allergies. And of course, it affects our immune system hugely. You would have learned a lot about vitamin D probably in the last few years since COVID hit. But anyways, so my quick answer is no, I don't recommend routinely just giving vitamin D to babies and children. They are synthetic, and how we utilize vitamin D that we take orally in a supplement form is dependent on our genetic setup. So it's actually really complex. Often when I test women for vitamin D, I test the active, it's actually a hormone, but anyways, it's the active form of vitamin D that's in the body and the inactive form that's in the body, because I need to see if they're aligned or hugely disproportionate to each other, because the conversion of inactive vitamin D to active is a whole process. So anyways, that's why I think it isn't smart to give synthetic vitamin D. There's no studies really to say that that's a really great idea. What I do think is a great idea is that if you are breastfeeding, that you are staying on top of your vitamin D results. And I think specifically for you, Mama, I think we're testing it at the moment, so that will give us some insight. And there's a certain level ratio that breastfeeding mothers should have to ensure that we have enough in the milk. So that's what I test for, basically. Now, depending on where we live and lifestyle, there's a lot of components as to how we are getting vitamin D into our little babies. And of course, here in Australia, it's not advised to spend so much time in the sun, directly in the sun. And I talked about it last time a little bit in terms of sun exposure, I think, where I was sort of saying spend some time in the sun before 10 a.m. But when we look at the natural sort of boosting vitamin D, when people either can't or won't or shouldn't take supplementation, artificial, then it is actually around midday, which is also when it is the most dangerous to be in the sun. So what I can see in the research is saying 4 to 5 minutes max for a baby under 1, and should be in the sun around midday for those few minutes. So I would say 4 minutes for us Aussies or people living in Australia. But because that is the most natural way of getting vitamin D, and of course without sunblock on or any other moisturizers, which I talked about. I don't think we should put moisturizers on our babies. So because that changes the oils in our skin and how we convert and absorb and use the vitamin D that we get from the sunshine. So one approach is to make sure that you go for a little walk in the sun and they have their top off and get a few minutes literally of sunshine exposure. And then the next step, I would say, of course, is testing your level so that if you are breastfeeding, that you know what's in the milk. But if a woman is formula feeding, there will be some vitamin D in the formula in all the modern ones. When your baby starts solids, that's when you can get a little bit more creative. And this is when it's really important, because vitamin D is a component in the building blocks to reduce our chances of infections, allergies, and much, much more. It's part of our bone health and pretty much everything. So I would say that a very traditional approach to vitamin D has been to give cod liver oil in many, many different cultures. And of course, focusing on vitamin D rich foods, which is, for example, egg yolk from organic eggs, all depending. If there's a family history of egg allergies, then we would need to talk about that. But I would start to actively focus on getting the vitamin D from foods. Cod liver oil is a really smart one because you get high levels of vitamin D, but you also are getting it from a natural source, so you're not giving anything synthetic. There are cases of, babies that aren't growing very well where we would, take other approaches, but none of you are in that category. So that was a really long answer. The short answer is no. Are there any way to prepare for the 4-month sleep regression? I know this is probably super popular. And so what she's doing is she's currently, when William falls asleep, she feeds him at the bedtime, then I put him in his bassinet, and sometimes he wakes up shortly, starts crying, and I feed him again. Sometimes he's able to self-settle, go him. And not sure if I should do something differently. I don't think you should. Look, not everyone has a 4-month sleep regression. I have never been prone to really caring about these regressions. I know it's really popular, and so I'm perhaps not the right person to talk about these sort of regression type things. I guess I acknowledge that they happen, but I also really, I guess, want to balance it out with the fact that not every baby has these classical regressions at the exact times that they're said to happen. There was a study on it, I can't remember, but it was like the numbers made it seem a little bit insignificant as to why we're putting so much emphasis on these regressions. If you're a mom who's having a baby in a sleep regression, then I know you would probably feel like we should take it really serious. So I get it. But what I will say is don't change anything. But what you do need to do, and there's nothing you can do to prepare for something we don't know if it's going to happen at all. So no, don't need to prepare anything. What you can consider is to really, observe your baby's sleep cues and really tune into your baby a little bit more, to kind of, notice what are his signs for sleep, and what is the stages of alertness and activity throughout the day and in the evening, and what's he like before he starts to really need a nap. And you can start to really hone in and pay attention to your baby's cycle throughout the day and sleep sort of times, because you're getting at around 4 months, you're getting into a time where soon enough, you'll have more routine in your life, which you may or may not like. But, I think, just paying attention to the cues and feeding our babies to sleep is not a bad thing. It's giving them that security and safety and connection, which is what they're wired for. They're not wired for self-settling. They're not wired to be on their own, doing their own thing at this stage. It comes later, I promise. They will. So I guess don't anticipate it too much. Just pay attention and notice, oh, maybe he doesn't seem so tired at this time, or wow, he's really seeming unusually tired at this other time. So you can start to sort of help him into an easier transition into sleep. I hope this makes sense. If you want to talk about it more, shoot me some feedback in that comment section. But you don't have to prepare for anything because it may not be very significant. And yeah, I think that's my answer. I really do love feeding them to sleep. So that's where I'm coming from. I think it's worth, if that doesn't resonate, or if you want to do something else, then, listen to other, I'm not a sleep expert, but listen to some sleep experts, perhaps, I don't know. Yes, and this mama, she's moved to Queensland. She was here in New Zealand, now Queensland, and it's getting hotter where she is. And I'm wondering if I should start giving William some water to drink. And I love this question so much. So thank you for asking it. The answer is no. It's a big, big no, because we cannot, before our babies have started solids, the only fluid that you'll be getting is milk or formula, breast milk or formula. And it's important we don't dilute it with water. I know it seems like it's getting hotter, and they must be hotter, and therefore they need some more hydration. He will probably just feed more often. We never ever give water to babies before they've started solids. So that's important because it can dilute how much actual milk or formula they get. In this case, breast milk. How much breast milk he will be getting. And that's essential. It's so important that the hydration is coming from the breast milk or formula for other women listening. So no. And once he has started solids, then yes, then give him a little bit of water with meals. I don't know if I talk much about that in the in the actual knowledge session, but a little bit of water with the meal, or putting the water into the puree, or not the puree, but the mash of food you're giving him. And I think that still, breast milk or formula is going to be the number one. So when it gets, even here in New South Wales, when eventually it gets warmer, one can hope, then, focus on giving more milk, even if your baby has started solids. They usually ask for it. They usually do demand more milk. You're so welcome. I'm glad that makes sense. And yeah, okay, good. I'm glad the water thing. I'm so glad you asked, because it's actually a really common question, but I just somehow assume that health nurses and other people sort of talk about it. But yeah, really good point. Never ever water until solids. So this mama, I've noticed that I'm sweating more than I did before I gave birth. Is that normal? Yes, it's normal. Again, your hormones are still regulating. I'll answer that in a minute. So what I will say with that is, it takes a while after birth to, we're still transitioning and morphing into this sort of, the phases of the postpartum for the first year after birth. So we're still in this like limbo state where our menstrual cycle is not back yet for most of you guys. And there's a huge sort of hormonal component to the postpartum, and lack of sleep and all the stuff that we're doing. So it's very common to be sweating more at night. And I think maybe also, you are in Queensland now for this particular mama. So you might be sweating for that reason. But it's simply a sign that your hormones are still shifting and chopping around, doing different things. What can help in a more, I guess, from a naturopathic perspective, is to, of course, make sure you are hydrated, really well hydrated, and using electrolytes such as even just simple like a Celtic sea salt or mineral salts, and just sprinkle a little bit in your water once or twice a day, helps to absorb the water a little bit better. A lot of people struggle to actually absorb the water we drink, which is not great. And it means we just pee and pee and pee. It takes a while to sort of really absorb this water. So add a little bit of sea salt, or use electrolytes to absorb the water you drink. So that's one component. The other thing you could do is gentle skin brushing to kind of just help the lymph system move things around. Drinking things like dandelion root tea can be really helpful, dandelion leaf tea even, just to help the elimination process. But it's not that you need to detox or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying, but more just in terms of helping the natural processes within the body. So gentle skin brushing, and what you do is you go from your extremities, so fingers and toes, and you gently brush up towards the heart. You just, wherever you start, you just gently brush your entire body towards your heart. Don't brush your breasts. But that can be just a way of just naturally helping your body finding a new balance, because there's a lot happening in your body in the postpartum. So let me know if it's extreme. But it sounds like you're moved to a hotter place, and it sounds like you're in the postpartum, and that's normal. But it's a good question. I just wanted to address this one, Olivia. When Bob is on solids for a bit, say a few weeks, how do you know when to back off milk? Would you ever respond to a hunger cue with food rather than milk? For a few weeks? No, milk is so important on that stage still. So I wouldn't back off the milk until 8 or 9 months. If a baby is really into solids and loving it, then like, woohoo, really excited about it. Some babies aren't. But if your baby is, then if a baby is really interested in food, then that's great. Then you just continue to offer milk as the primary until 8 or 9 months. And then you can start to shift where you then give the milk after the food, or reduce that slightly. So how do you know when to back off milk? You don't really back off milk until you don't actively do anything to back off the milk. It's still until, the first birthday. It is the main absorbable nutrient form that you're offering. So it isn't safe to reduce your milk that you're offering to your baby before the first birthday. And even after that, you do it gradually. If a baby is, so let me know, how are you going with solids? how's it going? Then I can follow up on that. But I would say that if a baby isn't loving solids, then I sometimes do recommend, not if it's the first few weeks, if it's the first, I guess 8 months mark is the one where we need to see that the baby is definitely interested in solids and are able to digest and do all these different things without getting rashes or anything. So if a baby is prioritizing milk, because some of them are really clever, they love milk so much and they will demand it over solids. That, I would say, it's a bit of a fine line there in terms of making sure that they also do get some of the solids, just from the pure element of education and building that relationship. So it's only if a baby is definitely not interested that I would say, let's try and offer the milk definitely after a meal. But otherwise, I would say just don't back off until the first birthday, as long as your baby is eating when offered solids and interested. Okay, Luca's doing great with them so far, but he still loves milk, so it seems to be a lot. Yeah, great. No, you're in a great position. So just milk is still really, really important at this stage. If after 8 or 9 months, you just make sure the milk is coming after the meal. So they start to slowly gravitate towards filling up on solids, and then the milk is a backup. But for now, the milk is still the hero. So well done. Okay, you're welcome. I hope you will. Okay, so let's get into the nuts thing, because this is the mama's question here. I believe it's from you. So there's a family history of severe nut allergies, and this is really tricky, and it's a little bit scary. I get it. So the naturopathic mentality around it is that we want to prepare the immune system as much as possible, at the same time as not overstimulating it or overreacting, or causing the immune system to be overreactive. So what I thought would be helpful is to give a little bit of an overview on it, because I think it's good information for everyone who's worried, and that's a lot of people. So the classic allergens are peanuts and cow's milk, wheat, and kiwi, banana, and avocado. And it has, look, in terms as a practitioner, the advice swings back and forth all the time in terms of when we should advise our clients just to, do this allergy support. But from a naturopathic perspective, one is genetics. So in this case, there's a genetic component to it, which makes it more likely that there could be a reaction to nuts in this case, or whatever else. It could be eggs, of course, is another classic one. I think I forgot that one. We want to make sure that the foundation of the gut flora and the immune system is nice and balanced as much as it can be. And we need to see that, for example, so things like, bowel motions being either, if there's constipation, if there's diarrhea, if there's mucus in the stool, those are signs that things are not quite balanced. Skin rashes is another linked component. And I know this is relevant for this mama, such as eczema. So that can say that there is a predisposition potentially. So when we look at supporting a baby prior to solids and during solids, it's about offering that microbiome balance. And that can be done through supplemental probiotics, a specific one that's called LGG and L-Ruterus, specific strand. Anyways, get in touch. I'll get them for you. But as well as optimal vitamin D levels and something called fructooligosaccharides, which is naturally in breast milk, and it's also put into formulas these days because they've caught on to how important that is. Basically, what all of that does is it balances the immune system and reduces an inflammatory cytokine response within the immune system, which can cause an allergy. Yeah. So those are some of the, in a nutshell, the important elements to add and support someone who has a predisposition to allergies. So that's one aspect. In a case of a nut concern or allergy, and you can have a pen ready to write this down, but roasting nuts, for example, peanuts, which is a classic one, enhances the allergic component to that nut and makes it more reactive. So you wouldn't offer, let's say, a 8-month-old a meal where it had roasted nuts in it. That would make it worse. Potentially it could make it worse. But boiling, and this is what I usually rely on, is to boil the concerned allergen, so a nut, boil it, and that will then reduce the chances of that allergic component. So you kind of offer a little bit of the allergen to the baby's immune system and see if there's a reaction. The first thing you would do then is, let's say, boil the nut, let's say 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, boil it, then crush it or chew it, and then put it onto the baby's skin. If it's really severe, the immune system will react to that within a few hours. If there's no reaction to that, you can then touch a little bit on the lip or touch it on the tongue and see if anything happens after a few days. Yeah. So there's different ways of introducing it, but in a gentle way, so that we have pre-prepared that allergen. So it's not the full-blown response. We don't want to trigger a full-blown allergy response in a tiny little baby. That's not fun at all. So I wanted just to let you know that boiling the food will reduce the chances of it being really aggressive. The same with baking will decrease an allergic response specifically to eggs and dairy. So if anyone out of you are worried about eggs, because that is also a very classic one, you could, bake them before you offer them to your baby. And which is also why it's just generally recommended that we, prepare the food that we're offering, the vegetables, etc., to our babies, is because it reduces the allergen load in the food. So general cooking, so steaming, boiling, etc., of the plant foods is what reduces the chance of them being reactive, because the plant world can be highly reactive to people's immune system. Fermented foods is probably a good idea, and it wasn't in the Nutrition Foundation's thing that you listened to in the knowledge session, but traditionally fermented foods were also given alongside as you're sort of building up the array of different foods that you're offering your baby. Traditionally, fermented foods was incorporated into that. So miso, for example, or the sauerkrauts and yogurts and so on. They're what also help to support the gut flora and that beautiful balance, which is ultimately the defense system for the baby's immune. So I think that is really important in terms of if you're worried about a certain type of reaction in your baby because of a genetic predisposition, prepare the food correctly. So let's say boil the peanuts and just offer it on the skin around 6 months. That's where I'm sitting. I know some are saying to do it a little bit sooner, but I guess you're talking to me, so this is my feedback you're getting. And I would start really gently like that. I would then make sure that you're also giving your baby fructooligosaccharides as a supplemental form, plus the probiotics that are specifically indicated in reducing the chances of an allergic response. So I think that is sort of the first step. And then start with some of the less reactive foods that you learned about in the course in terms of giving your baby, prepared plant foods, and also focusing, of course, on the egg yolk and some meats, etc., to really start how is your baby doing with foods that are not meant to cause a reaction. And then you could then introduce the nut or the allergen more internally after a little while. I hope that made sense. I feel like I kind of did that in a really roundabout way. If you're on the call, please tell me yes or no, so I know if that made sense. So let me just summarize that quickly. I would boil the nut, for example, in this case, crush it or chew it up with your own teeth, put a little bit on the skin around 6 months. It's okay if you started your baby on solids already. Just to sort of start that. If nothing happens, then I would then continue with offering the solids as per the program. But then if all is going well, I would then again boil a nut and then chew it and crush it and then offer a little bit on the tongue and see if there's a reaction. And then the next step would be maybe a few days or a week or so later, offer it as a food. But the current recommendation is to offer it somewhat early on. So I would say before 7 months. But I would definitely prepare it really well so it's not just a raw nut. Let me know if that's good information. And yeah, I guess use that as a bit of a guideline if there's a specific food you're concerned about in your family history. I do think taking probiotics or offering your breast milk. So, for some who choose to stop breastfeeding, for example, around 6 months because they return to work or whatever, it is a risk factor. It's really smart to continue to breastfeed during starting solids because you reduce the chances of your baby having a reaction because the breast milk offers those fructooligosaccharides. And it's not common recommendation to give your baby fructooligosaccharides, FOS, routinely. But I wonder if it will be in the near future because that seems to where all the evidence is pointing towards that type of carbohydrate, which is what it is, offer this beautiful effect in lowering the chances of allergies. That makes sense. Good to know. Great. I'm glad it makes sense. So I guess don't be too afraid of it, but just make sure you've taken the right steps prior in terms of offering the probiotics. And in this case, for this mama, I think we need to just talk about that component of getting the right probiotics. I had a question about essentialism and lifestyle, and I saw it's a little while back. I think it was last month. So it's a little bit out of the context of this call. So I just want to reach out to you ladies, and you guys can let me know if you have any more questions in terms of solids. And is there anything more I want to say about solids before I move on? I think I've talked about how, it is an emotional time, and I want to just really honor that for those of you who feel like it is emotional in terms of, I've had a lot of crying mums on the end of the phone feeling sad about moving away from just offering milk to their baby, and others think it's it's delightful to kind of move on to the next stage, which it of course is. It's a milestone in many ways. But yeah, I hope that you feel prepared, and I hope that you feel happy, and it can create a really joyful time for both of you to take this new step. All right, so I wanted to move on to this other comment or question, and I saw on the form that someone was just intrigued to know more about essentialism and lifestyle. I think I touched about it a few knowledge sessions back. And it's actually something I'm really passionate about, so I'm happy to talk about it in terms of our mental health. And there is some research to say that children have lower chances of anxiety and stress and overwhelm, etc., if they are growing up in a minimalistic household. So and this is something somewhat recently, this is way before I actually implemented it in my life, in my family life. And I think it's so interesting, basically, that as changing the way we live will not only change how our mindsets are and reduce our chances of anxiety and overwhelm, but it actually is the same for the children. So sometimes we can think that children they don't notice or they don't care, they just carry on. I mean, I certainly feel that way sometimes when I see my children's bedrooms, that I feel like they have no issues with mess. when I ask them sometimes, sorry, side note, but when I ask them sometimes, and this is the older ones, are you not, do you not enjoy when your room is clean and tidy and cozy? And don't you feel really comfortable? And they just look at me like, what? No. So, anyways, but the studies say that that children are less likely to get anxiety and overwhelm and depression if they grow up in minimalistic household. I think that's really interesting. So I would say, I think in that knowledge session, I talk about the essentialism aspect, and there is a book you should read or listen to. It's also available in audio, and I'm pretty sure it's linked in that. Anyways, let me know if it isn't. But it's about the concept of and often this can be done through family meetings. I'm a bit of a fan of that in terms of your partner and whoever you're close with in your life. Like, what makes you guys thrive, and what are the things that needs to be in your life for you to thrive. And when you really go through it, you might notice that there's a lot of extra fluff for whatever reason, whether that's because you're hanging on to stuff and old memories, or it's because you feel like your home should look a certain way and you should have a certain amount of books on the shelf, or I don't know, whatever. Or you're hanging on to old pots in your kitchen, or old jars, or whatever. Sometimes it's very unconscious and we just kind of carry on, and often it's, old habits from when we grew up as children and how our parents lived and so on. But it's really, really important to revisit that as you're a new family, and as a mother, find out, is the stuff around you, I don't want to say creating joy because I don't want to go too condo on this, but is it giving you what you need, or is it adding more chaos in your life? So this takes time. We did it over several months. But it's very, we know very clearly what are the things that work for us in terms for us to thrive and not feel overwhelmed. And I notice it immediately when I'm not on top of it. I very, very quickly feel overwhelmed if I can't, within minutes, tidy my home. I think it's that load, that mother load, which I love talking about as well, is that we, as mothers, we have layers upon layers of thoughts that perhaps fathers and partners don't have to the same extent. I think it's an emotional component. I think it's an involuntary component to the motherhood role, in terms of thinking about, what's the temperature of my child? What's, what am I feeding my child tomorrow? And how am I gonna, make that appointment at this time and time it with the nap time? I think sometimes our thoughts are 17 steps ahead of everyone else. And if on top of that, our home or our environment or our schedule is cluttered, it will, that is what can tip us over and create stress, anxiety, outbursts, rage, tears, etc. So it's actually really, really important. The way to do it is to literally, like I said, nitty gritty, like what is essential to our life, food, fridge, literally like that. How many pots do we need in our kitchen? How many plates do we need? How often do we have guests? Can things be simplified there? So you literally go through everything you have, and you then go, what is essential? And if it isn't essential, it's got to go. So it can be really hard. Hence, it's good to do over a little while. I think there's a good tip. There's two guys that they're called the minimalists. I think they sort of say, if there's something you've packed away as a trial, let's say old books or things that you love but you don't really use, and if you pack it away in a box and put it in your garage or somewhere, and you haven't thought about it in 6 months, it deserves to go, for example. So I hope it's interesting, and I hope that you will visit it, and I'll look at into this a little bit more in terms of children's health, but it makes sense to me. That, of course, one part of it is that if they have stressed parents who are overwhelmed and get outraged by mess, let's say, or if it's hard to keep a home, dust free, because that's another part to the allergen components. It's it's important that we don't have an overload of dust, let's say, or a chance of having cockroaches and so on, so there's different elements to it that are hugely important. So revisit it, not revisit it, visit it, and dive into it. It's I'm so passionate about it. Very often when I speak to mothers who have either been diagnosed with depression or anxiety, or perhaps are on medication for it, or mothers that are just overwhelmed, one component, is, like, how do you feel about your home? How are you managing your home? Because one thing is nappies and, bottles and, extra bits that is required when we have a baby. But how quickly can you get on top of your day? How quickly can you get on top of your home? How quickly can you get on top of your to-do list? And do you feel burdened by your calendar? Is there too much for you guys to do? Don't do it. Keep it simple. Yeah, okay, Elke is saying, we'll need to look into this further. How do you do it with clothes? Oh, I'll tell you. I currently look into capsular wardrobe. Are you doing something like that? No, I'm not doing anything fancy. I like that though. So let me know if you do that. What I did was, so I found that really challenging, because I noticed that part of me, I'm getting very personal here. Part of me was, I had an attachment to maintaining some of my old life. Some of you don't maybe not know, but because I don't talk about it, but I worked as a model for my entire life since I was 15 years old. So there's a part of me that wanted to not let go of that part of me, and there was this attachment to maintaining life outside the motherhood role. So that was actually, it's a great question, Elke. And also it took me longer, but what I did was, I chose to simply go like, how do I feel, and not how do I look? Because, and I know you know this, but when you feel good, then you come up, you show up, you are you. If you are somehow restricting yourself or compromising yourself, or wearing something that, let's say, is beautiful but not convenient for the motherhood role, then you will hinder yourself, both physically perhaps, and also just feel a bit agitated. So I kind of went into it from a sensory approach, because I personally had to let go of some things to really fully accept and arrive into this motherhood role, which was important to me, because of course I work in this aspect so much, and I am in mothers' homes, and it was, I had to really be authentic, basically, but I had to find a new authentic self. And this might perhaps be relevant for you guys, because you guys have just entered into motherhood, or some of you are entering still. So I do think that there is a new side to us that show up, not just emotionally, which we've talked about a lot about in terms of just the fourth trimester and all that, but just learning to find out, who are you in this, and what part of you do you want to maintain, I suppose. Do you not just want to wear active wear all day long for the rest of your life and a mum bun? Then find out what makes you feel good, is what I'm trying to say. And that's what I did. Yeah, I just kind of found out what are the things that make me feel like I can be happy and be practical, but also obviously feel good about myself. And I just kind of narrowed it down to that. And then I don't allow myself to have more than one or two of a thing. So if that's a type of dress, I have one type of the dress. If it's something that potentially is used a lot, then maybe you have two colors of it, let's say. But it's more just that, you don't need 5 pairs of jeans when you come to it from an essentialism point of view. I know some of the people that I've listened to, and in this realm, a lot of them are men, and I think men and women have different have different needs in life, let's face it. But often men will have, they go a different approach. They say, I buy one type of jean and one type of t-shirt and one type of jumper because that's all I'm going to wear, and that's how I show up minimalistically. And that means I know I don't have to think about what I wear in the morning. I just show up, put those jeans on and that t-shirt on, and then off I go, and I'm happy and content and comfortable. I think it's a little simple for them. I think women, there's room for more. but the other part of it is also just spending less time on thinking about what to wear and do I look good or should I look a certain way. That's another emotional component that can be really triggering for especially new mothers, but mothers and women in general. There's this thing like, how should I look? How should I show up? How do other people perceive me? Which I think is really interesting. That is one of the root causes of anxiety, depression, and self-loathing. So this is a very deep and comprehensive topic, and I think we can do ourselves the favor of actually going in and saying, how do I feel when I wear this? How do I feel when I wear this? And simplifying that way. But if you don't have to think very much in the morning, and what's in your cupboard is comfortable, you like it, you feel good, then you just get up, put it on, and then you go and deal with your day. Spend less time on it. So when it actually came to it and I had gone through that emotional thinking process, I then, it was really easy. And now it's a no-brainer. It also means you shop less. It means there's less temptation. Thanks so much for sharing. You're welcome. Yeah. Okay, good. How do I feel? Makes a huge difference to me. Yeah. And it's if you're breastfeeding, of course, there's some practical components to it. I think when I'm still breastfeeding, but not very often. And my breasts have calmed down a lot, so I don't need to worry about sort of breastfeeding tops. But back when I did, I think I had, what did I have? 2 or 3 max of tops that sort of allowed for that, whether that was a shirt or a certain nursing top that I didn't find too awful, that I then wore, and or stretchy things that I could just pull down and whip the boob out. So again, I guess it ties into that thing of just, you don't need that many things. You just don't need that many things. And especially in this time that you're in, your body is probably still shifting. You're probably finding that your body is not the body that was prior to birth, prior to pregnancy. And so that will take a while for it to settle into this new you. And so allow yourself a bit of time. I don't think now is the time to settle on a type of wardrobe. I think you're going through a phase of morphing. And I think that morph time is the 2 years after birth. So somewhere in that, spend this time to get to know yourself, be curious, and be really kind and gentle with yourself as you're finding yourself and who you are, because there has to be room for all aspects of you. And so dress accordingly. I think definitely become a more practical person since motherhood, and we have to, otherwise it becomes so stressful in the day-to-day life if we're not feeling practical and comfortable. That was a great topic. Didn't see that one coming. Any other questions, let me know. What did I want to say? There was one component to going a little bit back now to the allergy aspect, and I know I've talked about it before, in terms of the getting to know our babies and our babies' health and so on. But I'll bring it up because we're talking about allergies, and the research is basically screaming at us to tell us that diversity is the number one thing we can do for both during pregnancy, actually during conception, in the lead up to conception, during pregnancy, and in the early few years of our baby's life, is to expose them to diversity of nature. And it comes up in every aspect that I read in terms of children's health, and especially when it comes to immune. So the rates of allergies are going up in urban areas, and the rates are going up in higher socioeconomic areas, countries. And so I think that's interesting. And that ties down to lack of biodiversity. I know I've talked about this, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's so important that I cannot let you go through life without at least having made a conscious decision to not do this. So what are you choosing to do? If we use a lot of products, it will impact our children's and yours immune system and biodiversity in the gut. So don't do it. You don't need it. Going back to essentialism, you don't need stuff. You don't need oil. You don't need creams. You don't need so many soaps. You don't need anything that has a perfume in it. You don't. Perfume is one of the number one that is incredibly triggering for immune responses. So there is no need for them. It's a pure modernized need that we should smell a certain way, but it totally messes with everything internally. So that's, I think that's really important to know that, the more urban we are, the higher the chances of allergies. So what they're saying is weekly, if not daily, exposure to biodiversity in nature. So that's really frequent. And that's a lot, perhaps, if we're living in the city, to somehow manage to get that. But I think it's good for you guys to know that biodiversity seems to be the number one factor to help inoculating the child's gut flora and stabilizing the immune system. So make sure that you kind of has that maybe in your essentialism planning, like what is important for us as a family. Maybe health is high on the list. I hope so. Then you can sort of go in and say, well, what are the things we're going to do for our health? How are we going to reduce our chances of illness and dis-ease? And perhaps now you know that spending a lot of time in nature and different types of nature is basically what the data is telling us to do. So you need to incorporate that into your life. So maybe that becomes more important than other things you might be spending your time on. So I think that's interesting because there's nothing, we can't put that into a bottle. We can't do anything to simplify that. And what they often say is to go visit farms. And so do farm visits and different types of farms with pigs, farms with sheep, farms with, everything. So really change it up, but make it part of your, and your children will love it, especially soon or next year. Your children will thrive doing that. So it's a fun thing to do. I started really early on visiting farms, and I would go and visit fruit farms and vegetable farms and, animal farms. And I did all kinds of things when I was living in Bondi and Vaucluse. So I guess I wanted to say that because that's kind of the most important element. I, of course, talk about the things that I can offer you and what I can do for you in terms of the probiotics and the, foods and so on. But, that's part of the lifestyle component that we can't ignore. It simply is where we are dictates who we are. Pretty cool. I think that's why many families move to the country. And I guess with that also comes, don't use things that are not offering that. So that means, cleaning products. Be really careful with them. Keep your house clean, but make sure you have a really good vacuum that can take, all degrees of dust. Use more natural products, things like bicarb soda and vinegar and essential oils and really warm water and things like that to clean your house, as opposed to just the things that are in the chemical aisle in the supermarket. Just walking down the chemical aisle, the cleaning product aisle in the supermarket, I feel like my microbiome is being totally butchered every time I walk past there. So I don't. And the same with perfumes and shampoos and soaps and all that. You don't really need it. Good old soap is enough. You don't need anything with perfume in it. You can use essential oils, but they also have good effects. For example, lavender, small amounts of lavender in let's say shea butter or something like that is really good for baby's skin, and can be one way of supporting their babies and reduce any inflammation that's on the skin. Anyways, that's a bit of a side example, but just I hope that helps. Any other questions? Let me know. Otherwise, I am nearing my end of what I had on my mind. Let me know if there's any questions. I hope everyone is doing well. I am, again, really sorry about the community forum not working. I don't know why, and they are working on it. And as I said, I have a bunch of emails that I am to address after this call, because the tech people have been sending me lots of emails today to try and fix it. So hopefully it means it's fixed. Just me, in regards to nappies for the beach. Yeah, there are actually, well, I was trying to post and I couldn't post the link. There's a really cute brand that I found that do nappies for the beach that they can swim in and also acts as a nappy. So maybe I'll send it when the forum works. I used to simply just use, they were really ugly ones, but there are fancier ones today. But I think they were called Splash or something like that, which is just like a tight, really tight, sort of like nappy suit. So they were just really tight. So if your baby sort of poos or whatever, it stays in there. That's what I've used for all of mine. But I noticed that they're much nicer today. So I will put a link up, and maybe I'll send it to you directly. But once the forum works, I'll send it to everyone. That's a really cute one. I don't know if probably all of you mamas have looked into it because you're all near beaches, I think. But I would also say that not wearing a nappy on the beach is a really good thing too. It really helps with nappy rashes and things like that. And once you get to a certain age, when is that? I think it's around 7 months or so-ish. You get to see a real pattern in terms of bowel motions in your baby. And usually, majority of them will be in the morning or at a certain time of day. And that can sort of help you to sort of gauge whether you could go nappy free for a moment on the beach. But that's also what I would do. Yeah, I would wear this. So Silky is asking if I would wear the swimsuit without a nappy. Yeah, I would, and I did, and I do. But if you're in a pool, you can't, then you need something to keep anything that comes out. Pee, of course, is pee. You can't, there's nothing you can do. But it's the poo element, because this happened to me once out of 4 children, I think it's pretty good. But once I was in a pool and there was an accident, but I was still wearing a nappy. So there's no guarantees. But yes, if you're just on the beach or whatever, then you would just put on a little cute swimsuit to protect their skin from burning. All right, lovely people, thank you for joining me. And for those of you listening later, hello. And I'll see you in a few weeks. And hopefully the forum is working soon, so you can put more questions and communicate with one another. Lots of love. And kiss your baby.